welcome back to Glenn's Comic Corner Classic New Classics. This is episode number 1515 and Doubleshot number 1409. Here I'm discussing the first two volumes of the... This is actually from the 2011 printing of this particular trade series. Not the original printing, the 2011 version. This is Batman No Man's Land. Now, if you don't know what the heck No Man's Land is because of Batman, it was at this point in time when this book came out, when this storyline ran, it was by far the longest running storyline ever in the history of Batman comics. Heck, this book had almost as many books as freaking Nightfall did. And here's the thing, the 2011 printing of this thing didn't take as many trades as Nightfall. Nightfall took up 8 books for its third round of trades. This took up 4, and the original printing was 5. Now, what caused this? This change of status quo for Batman comics. This all started because of the event known as Cataclysm. Yes, it was a crossover that ran all the Batman books. It happened back in, I think it was like 1999, I believe it was. Yes, it was a book, like in the case of a lot of the other bad books. It, simply put, was a crossover. Was a 18-part story that basically ran for about a few months in the year of 1998. Yep. And here's the thing. In the aftermath of this, pretty much a near year-long build. Oh my gosh, this basically took up a freaking long time for this thing. So, what's the whole point of No Man's Land thing? Now, what type of earthquake was... Now, basically, Gotham City was hit with an earthquake. Let's see. I think it was a... I think they said it was like a 5.6, I think it was. It was a really big earthquake. Yeah. Really big earthquake caused a lot of damage to Gotham City. Yes, it became the second ever DC city ever in history of the comic books at this point in time. It only had been just a few years since the last time they did something to a particular city to DC, and that was Coast City. Though that was destroyed. Though it was later rebuilt, don't worry about that. But Gotham City was basically reduced to ruin. So, in the time between Cataclysm and No Man's Land, this, of course, was collected in the storyline Road to No Man's Land, where simply Bruce Wayne went to Washington. Oh yeah, by the way, Robin was actually out of town during the events of Cataclysm, and when he was coming home, the plane had to redirect the flight to a different town because everyone in the plane was wondering what the heck was going on. And then someone looked at them like, "Oh crap! Gotham City is basically, a ruin." Everyone was wondering what the heck happened. So they had no choice but to redirect different places. I'm sure the airport was not very safe. So they redirect different town. Oddly enough, when it came to the road to No Man's Land, here's something really weird though about this particular storyline. Now, for some reason, I have no idea why the heck this is. Now, there was now, in the case of Cataclysm, No Man's Land, and of course the Road No Man's Land, it followed pretty much all the Bat books published at that point in time. Except one. Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey had nothing to do with the story. I have no idea why Birds of Prey was not involved with it, despite the fact Barbara Gordon is clearly involved in the actual events of the story. Now, Bruce Wayne tries his damnedest to get federal aid to help rebuild the city. But Congress stupidly says no, because they don't like the fact that this country has basically the highest crime rate. Based on what, exactly? Like, I would think, now Batman does fight crime. I would think Gotham City got a little bit better under Batman's basically tenure as well, being the protector of Gotham City. And this is how basically the book was written, per se, yes. And it was thanks to the Road No Man's Land stuff that Alan Grant ended his run for Batman Shadow of the Bat. Yeah, he was right on the book at the point in time. And Chuck Dixon was writing pretty much all the Bat books at this point, except for Batman and Azrael. But pretty much, yeah, he was writing everything. Oddly enough, Road No Man's Land did involve pretty much everything, including even like some of the Batman Chronicles stuff. Yes. Excuse me. Now, Batman Chronicles was actually one of the stuff that part of this particular story. This was basically a quarterly series. Lasted for about 23 issues. It actually ended not long after this, by the way. Yeah, and a lot of the issues from the series has been collected in trade. I'd say most of it has been, but not all of them per se. Oh yeah, and the covers were like movie posters. That was one thing cool about this series. I was reading at the time, basically, when the story was coming out. So basically, the U.S. government, instead of basically helping Gotham City, they decided to write it off and basically declare it a no man's land. This was basically in story. I'm sure this was planned, purely planned for the next 2 years worth of storytelling. So, because the fact it's declared a no man's land, no one is allowed to go there, and apparently no one is allowed to send relief. Also, all the bridges to Gotham City were destroyed. Not by the earthquake. Oh, no. It was destroyed by the U.S. government. Because apparently they don't want any aid coming to Gotham City. Because they're stupid. And that's how the writers rate them to be stupid. So, at the start of No Man's Land, we have these following heroes operating in Gotham City at this point in time. Batman, who just came back into town. We also have Oracle, the Huntress, and a new Batgirl. Yes, a new Batgirl. I'm going to show up the costume for this woman. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, isn't that the costume Cassandra Cain basically they're wearing? Yes, but she does make a debut, so don't worry, I will talk about her. So, Gotham City is pretty much divided into sections, per se. Yes, they explain this in the first book, per se. Which, by the way, the first book collects Batman's number one, Batman No Man's number one. This is a one-shot that basically started off this particular event. This book also contained issues 83... Let's see if I can find the actual thing here. Okay. It contained Batman Shadow Bat 83-86, Batman 563 to 566, Detective Comics 730-733, Azrael Agent of the Bat 51-55, Batman Legends Dark Knight 117 to 118, and Batman Chronicles number 16. Now, who are the writers for this particular book? Well, for the start of it is under Bob Gale, who does pretty much the first opening issues. Well, he does the opening 4 parts of the story. New Law, No Law and New Order, Strategy, Tactics, and Language. All done by Bob Gale. That's basically Batman Shadow Bat 83, Batman 563, and the Detective Comics 730. Agent of the Bat is basically entirely written by Danny O'Neill. Oddly enough, this book, despite lasting 100 issues, you probably think, did the original writer leave at some point? And basically it's different. It had like 3-4 writers. It had one for 100 straight issues and like 3 annuals and a few one-shots here and there. Danny O'Neill wrote the whole thing. Yeah, he wrote the whole thing because it was his character. So he pretty much did what he did with the character. Now, the case of basically outside of the main story, we have Legend Dark. Now, basically, for the next several parts of the stuff collected in this book here. Now, nothing in this book is done by Chuck Dixon. And I do mean, let's see, Chuck Dixon's stuff actually is not coming until later. Yeah, it's actually not in this book. Yeah, there's no Chuck Dixon stuff here. The next few parts, Legend Dark Knight 116. Shadow Bat 84, Batman 564, Detective Comics, 731. All done by Devin Grayson. Legend Dark Knight 117, and Shadow Bat 85, Ian Egglin. I'm not really familiar with him. But a lot of the other stuff in here. Now you have also Batman 565, Detective Comics 732. Let's see. 118 for Legends of Dark Knight, 80. Let's see, and I think that's pretty much it. Those issues done by Greg Rucka, which I believe. Oh yeah, he also recorded a story for Batman 6. I believe this was actually the first time he actually wrote for. That he wrote for Batman. Yes, I believe it was this very event was when he started his tenure as a Batman writer. I've met Greg Rucka, awesome guy to me in person. I think this was I think it was his early tenure with the Bat books with this very crossover. Yeah, this was actually his very first one he did, and Greg Rucka was pretty much the regular writer of this book for the next several years. Yes. Oddly enough, when it comes to his time at DC, he hasn't written that many books for DC. No, not really. Not a lot of them, per se. No, not really. I mean, let's see. This is a better page. Here we go. For DC, yeah, apparently Batman Chronicles 14, which actually is in the Road No Man's Land. So you can kind of say that No Man's Land is technically the start of Greg Rucka's time with the Bat books. And it would continue for the next several years, writing a whole lot of stuff. Yes. Last thing he did for a bit was the Death of Maidens. After that, he did pretty much nothing with Batman after that. No. Actually, he did make a brief return to Batman to do the Question feature, the stuff for the Question, and writing, of course, the Bat-Owned feature for Detective Comics. After that, nothing. Mostly, a lot of the time, he mostly spent his time with DC, writing stuff for Superman and Wonder Woman. Yeah, his most recent thing he did for DC was working on 754 Wonder Woman. The only non-Bat books he was working on was Checkmate, and, of course, he was also one of the writers for Gotham Central, which I will kind of discuss as what I discussed before. A lot of the air stuff in this book is written by Kelly Pudick. Kelly Pudick just does issue 566, and in the case of Detective Comics 733, and yeah, that's done by Bob Gale again. Now these are basically they're divided into sections. There's one guy, this relief guy, who tried to come in, but the U.S. Army says no. Yep. And, well... And there are people who are generally trying to help people in Gotham City. And because Gotham City is not technically a U.S. city at this point, there are people who stay behind. Now, for the GCPD, there are about four primary characters who actually with the city, despite the fact the U.S. government banning this point. And that's Jim Gordon, Harry Bullock, Renee Montoya, and, of course, Sarah Essen, Jim Gordon's wife. Also, Jim Gordon has a live interaction with Barbara Gordon in the story, along with Cassandra Cain. I will discuss more about that in a bit. Also, Jim Gordon, the way he's written whenever he interacts with Batman, he's very vengeful toward him. At one point, he punches him. No, seriously, he obviously hates Batman for this story for some reason. That's how the writers write it for some reason. I have no idea why. Also, you might ask, in these early portions, do any of the Batman villains take part of the story? Yes, you have the Penguin doing some stuff, not a lot. Mostly just Penguin and Two-Face do a lot of the stuff in the story. I have read the novelization of the story, and they actually removed the Azrael involvement. Now, these are the sections. Now, there's a section controlled by Black Mask, the Blue Boys, GCPD, the Face sector, it's probably like the neutral sector. There's a sector controlled by the Huntress. Yes, the Huntress is Guy territory. Along with Killer Croc, Low Boys, Licks and Treads, Mad Hatter, Mad Sector, Mr. Freeze, Mr. Zaz, the Penguin, Poison Ivy. She actually controls Robinson Park. Yeah, she controls the whole story. The Scarecrow, yes, Scarecrow's got his own freaking territory. Scarface, Street Tomas, and Two-Face. Yep. Oh, you gotta love this. Now, there's also, you have various areas you can probably think, oh, this is named after various people who involved with the Batman comics. Like you have Bob Kane Sound. One of two things I can think of in Gotham City named after Bob Kane. The other, of course, being the road where Wayne Tower is. Yes. You also have Dixon Docks, obviously named after Chuck Dixon. That's what I've heard a lot of the time, usually it's named after. Arkham Asylum is basically neutral territory. Now, there's grayed out areas here that's controlled by Black Mask. The Blue Boys control, they control the Trader Yards. Light Blue is controlled by... it's not really said, but yeah. This is a picture from the book. Yeah, that is how Gotham City is divided throughout this whole story. The territories themselves will change hands multiple times of this whole story. Like, some people gain this territory. It's basically a territory war of this whole entire thing. Ivy at one point is briefly held hostage by Clayface. Yes, she is held hostage by Clayface for 16 months. No idea why Clayface did this for, maybe because he probably thinks she's hot. Oddly enough, the Joker does not play a role in No Man's Land until the very end. Yeah, that's something weird about the Joker. He does not play a role in the story. Mostly just Two-Face. Yeah, Two-Face plays a role in the story. Poison Ivy, Clayface, but Joker? Nope. No, he doesn't. We have briefly Nightwing and Superman involved in the story. Nightwing tries to get involved. He literally gets involved later on in his own tie-in issues. Also, Batman returns to the story at the end of the first part. And you have, Barbara Gordon for some reason wearing a shirt that shows off her cleavage. Well, she's a beautiful woman. She can do whatever the heck she wants. Plus, she's an adult, too. Now, oddly enough, this I thought was kind of weird for Chuck Dixon to do this. Apparently, the Birds of Prey are, not involved with the story for some reason. You read this. Birds of Prey was clearly published at this point. And I believe that, I think this was probably just before. I think it was just not long after they found, I think it was either before or after Barbara Gordon found out, when Black Canary found out Barbara Gordon was Oracle. Yep. So, first person of the story, you have the GCPD gaining more territory. And of course, you have introduction to Batgirl, which of course, she is, speaking. Not the other Batgirl. Also, the way that this Batgirl is drawn, she's clearly a slightly older woman, and she's got a frickin' six-pack. Yeah, that's how she's drawn when she's wearing the costume. And only for the first portion of the story. Now, Joker does pop up occasionally in the story, but he doesn't do much of anything of note. It's mostly a lot of graffiti warfare. Alex Malik gets a chance to do some artwork in here, which is really good on his part. Or anything earth-shattering, per se. Aside from the fact that Batman is basically having trouble getting used to battling crime in a ruined city. He also set up a fresh Batcave. Also, in case you're curious, why does he use the Batcave in this story? Because Wayne Manor, somehow, for some reason, despite the fact usually depicted being far away from Gotham City, was actually affected by the earthquake. The mansion was partially damaged and exposed the Batcave. And also because of that, Bruce Wayne decided to block any media access to his mansion during this period of time because he did not want the media to find out he was Batman, which is a really smart move on his part. Yeah, part of his Batcave was destroyed. So Barbara and Nance were a father, and of course they fight. And of course, here's the thing: this is why I think the GCPD, and of course, Batman does meet new Batgirl, who he has no problem with at first until he finds out who's under the mask. Yeah, don't worry, I'll get to that. Hunter spots up occasionally at the start of this, in person. But what she's doing a lot of the time in the story, well, we'll get to that. Azrael, his involvement in the story is quite interesting. He was actually out of town at the time this story was happening, so he's actually called back by Batman because Batman needs him in Gotham City. Yep, and his issues are pretty much dealt with I gotta get back to Gotham City. Basically, he does get back to Gotham City. Excuse me. Yes, and also, we have this weird scene of a church and a mosque right next to each other. Normally in real life, this would actually not make much sense. Look at this. It's clearly a mosque and a Catholic church. Yeah, in real life, this actually would this actually was a year before 9/11, so this is before all the hate crimes that people who are Muslim got. Because, from what I remember hearing about this, is that a lot of people who are basically Muslim, they were publicly chastised for several years, even after 9/11. Because, of course, people blame the blame for them what happened 9/11. And no, this story is not allegory for 9/11. You want to know why? Because this happened, like the start of this happened 2 years before 9/11 ever happened. So, you cannot blame DC for doing something like this. As far as I can tell, the only criticism the storyline ever got was its length. I think that's the only thing people tend to criticize it for. It's a good story. Don't get me wrong, it's a good story. It's most like a series of self-contained stories, and the Bat books became very much serialized. Now, in the case of Azrael, that would usually self-contain its own thing, usually involved No Man's Land. But yes, the first major threat is, of course, Scarecrow. Yeah, he's the first major threat in the story. Yep. And of course, Huntress operates despite the fact, well, Batman does whatever. Yeah, Batman has got really dumb. This is how the way Batman's been written over the years is at times he doesn't like people operating Gotham City who are vigilantes unless they have his express permission. Yeah, and he's called off for it. Yep. So yeah, we have Huntress deal with various things. Now you might be asking, is Stephanie Brown anywhere in the story? No, she's actually out of town during the story happening. Yep. Oh yeah, apparently here's something quite weird though. Arkham Asylum is perfectly fine in this story. Yeah, it's kind of weird the fact that Arkham Asylum is like the only place still standing, no problem. Yep. Yeah, I'd say for the first part of this is actually just really good stuff here. We do get introduction to Cassandra Cain a little bit later on in the story. Let's see. Yeah, she makes her debut in this very story. It's actually an issue. Yeah, it's actually. A little bit later, we'll discuss it, don't worry. So, you can kind of say that for the first portion, it's like a series of events is happening. Batman said graffiti. And this is like, a lot of this is the best way to describe the first book. Oh yeah, in case you wondered, are the criminals still afraid of Batman? Yes. There's even this one really strange part where this big, humongous woman tries to nearly strangle him with her arms by breaking him, but that doesn't work. Pangor suffered through a broken nose in the story. Yeah. Oh boy, we get to this artist right here. Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of this artist. It looks so grainy. Yeah, for some reason, someone at DC thought this artist was a good idea for Batman. Yes, for some reason. It's a drawing called Mosaic. No, it's nothing to do with the Marvel characters. Yeah. I don't really know what to talk about when it comes to this one. It's just mostly just Batgirl, this Batgirl doing her own thing. Yeah, and of course there's Two-Face. That's something in the story too. at this point. For the first book to start this off, it's actually really good. Yeah, Joker pops up for Azrael. Just does this up there. Can't much else to say about this, but it gets a little more interesting in book 2. Yeah, we do briefly see Superman trying to help out, but doesn't do much help with it. Mr. Freeze pops up, and of course Clark tries to help out. Is like, nope, you're not needed. Let's see. I'm just going to read the book 2. Yeah, for the first start of this story, it's good. It just after the first few parts, it doesn't seem like a lot of stuff happens over the course of these opening part. Give it a 9 out of 10. Book 2 is stuff where a lot more interesting happens. Now, book 2 is when they finally start collecting Catwoman in this story. Yeah, Catwoman's involved in this one. This contains 567 to 568. Detective Comics 734, 735. Batman, Legend Dark Knight 119, 121. Batman, Shadow of the Bat 87, 88. Batman Chronicles 17. Robin, Volume 467. Nightwing 35, 37. Catwoman 72, 74. And Azrael, Age of the Bat 57, 56, 57. The Nightwing issues is mostly put... Of course, it's written by Chuck Dixon, obviously. This is where Chuck Dixon is a lot more involved in the story because it seems like at the first portion of it, he's not involved at all. It's much like other writers. Now you finally have Chuck Dixon involved. Nightwing issues is mostly Nightwing in charge of Blackgate. It's basically his involvement in the story because he's called back to Gotham City because of No Man's Land. And, they also include the Young Justice No Man's Land stuff. That is how Robin gets involved in the story. Now, in 567, we have the introduction to Cassandra Cain. Which this is not Batgirl at this point. No, she gets Batgirl a little bit in the story. Yeah, they also found out the Batgirl who was operating the story at this point is actually the Huntress. Which, when Batman finds out the fact she actually has hurt people, I think she actually killed a couple people, Batman's like, you're no longer Batgirl, you're fired. And basically tells him, he tells her don't operate in my city again. She's like, screw you, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want, so I'm not going to do anything with you. That's Huntress's attitude, and Batman's attitude to other vigilantes, unless they have this express mission, he doesn't like any other vigilante operating in his city. That is how he's been written. From what I can tell, this is something basically, do you think that this happened, in the Golden Age? Nope. Silver Age. No, I don't think this much basically became a big thing until basically in the late 90s. Yeah, that's when he started basically doing stuff like this. So the costume that Huntress was running around in, that was given to Cassandra Cain, which became Batgirl the following month after her debut. And she basically... Cassandra Cain at this point doesn't speak. Now, her father is David Cain. That was established very early on. Who the mother is, that actually would not be revealed until Cassandra Cain's solo title as Batgirl. Yep. As a matter of fact, the very same issue David Cain is introduced is when he introduced his daughter, Cassandra Cain. Which I believe at this point she's supposed to be about 17. And that's basically how old she's supposed to be at the start of the story. And I think by Flashpoint she's supposed to be about 20-ish. It's never really fully stated exactly how old she's supposed to be, but basically just a bit. So basically Cassandra Cain is given Batman's blessing to operate in the city, and of course Cassandra has got also Barbara's blessing to operate as Batgirl. What you gotta need a Batgirl. Now here's the odd thing about the title of Batgirl. The title itself has been inactive for years. Yes. Now, technically, in a way, Cassandra Cain is considered to be the second Batgirl. officially recognized by DC Comics, despite the fact it was actually one prior to her. Yes, that is pretty much how it is when it comes to being Batgirl. Mm-hmm. Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's the fact that you did technically have Betty Kane, but according to basically for a lot of people, the original Batgirl was, of course, Barbara Gordon. Her successor was, well, yeah, Helena Bertinelli posed as Batgirl, but she didn't really do much with the Batgirl. And here's the thing about Batgirl herself. No one has operated as Batgirl for over a decade at this point. So, I guess someone at DC thought, hey, why don't we have a Batgirl? Okay. And give it to a new character they created just for the story. At least Cassandra Cain has at least had her own fan base the last 20 years, so she's perfectly acceptable as Batgirl. As a matter of fact, currently she's operating as Batgirl once again. For the first time since like 2009, I think it is. It's been a while since she operated as Batgirl. Yep. Catwoman herself, her involvement in the story is kind of odd to say the least. Yes. Now, of course, Greg Rucka. Now, in the case of the stories printed here, Greg Rucka does the first couple parts printed here. Climb jumping is from Legend Dark Knight 119 and showed about 87. Kelly Pudick does the two-parter, well, Mark of Cain from Batman 567 and Tith Comics 734. Young Justice No Man's Land. This is actually not done by Peter David. As a matter of fact, it's one of the few things not done by him. This might be a Peter David book. It's about Chuck Dixon and Scott Beatty. Greg Cook does come back to issue 120. He also does... Let's see. Aside from doing 120 for, well, Legend Dark Knight, he also does Shadow Bat 88, issue 568 for Batman, Tith Comics 535, and that's it. Yeah. The Catwoman issues are actually by John Ostrander. Yes, John Ostrander. And the artwork is done by Jim Ballett. This is something I find interesting though. Through the Earth, like this three-parter, all done by Greg Rucka. The artwork is done by Dan Jurgens. Yep. Dan Jurgens. Scott McDaniel does some of the stories in here because he's writing Nightwing. Because, well, you have Chuck Dixon doing Nightwing, Robin, and I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, Chuck Dixon was not writing Catwoman this time. This is back John Ostrander running it. Batman Cargo 17 is done by Scott Beatty, Duford Wynn, and Chris Reynolds. Graham Nolan does the third story of this one. Yep. But this one, basically, you can kind of say there's a lot to move forward here. Like, the Huntress will still occasionally operate in Gotham City, but doesn't want anything with Batman because of his attitude. Yep. But you can kind of say this is the start of Cassandra Cain's tenure as Batgirl, which she would maintain for the next 9 years. Well, actually, for the next decade. For 10 years, she was Batgirl. Yes. Even though she had her ongoing series. Excuse me, I'll discuss more about that when I get to book 4. But this one, basically, like I said, this one feels like a lot of stuff progressing forward. This one, and we're only halfway through the released books. These books are really good. Of course, Asbury himself does briefly team up with the new Batgirl for a minor story arc. And, well, Robin's role is very minor at this point, though. He does play a role at the ending of this one. Oh, yeah, I'll be discussing that. That being aside of his issues, well, it mostly happened in Bloodhaven, the vigilante Nightwing, who was basically his NITE -WNING. That's how he pronounces it. That's how he spells his name. He basically becomes a sort of a deputized officer of the Bloodhaven Police Department by Chief Reinhold. Like, oh yeah, why don't you investigate some criminals? And he wants to start with this big thing. Like, nope, let's do small stuff first. Yeah, the thing with the Bloodhaven Police Department is, at this point in time, they were basically in the back pocket of Blockbuster. Yes, Blockbuster does appear in the Nightwing issues, but he does not appear at any other point in the story at all. mostly put, if you read Nightwing issues in here, it's mostly just sort of advertisement for the regular Nightwing stuff, because Nightwing's his series involvement in this story is, well, how should I put this? Very minor. Yeah, it's not very much at all. No. His actually had the least amount of issues. Only just about. Well, this book only went to like 37. He only has like 2 more parts, and that's it. No, seriously, that's pretty much it. A lot of the Arab books basically had tie-ins. In the case of Catwoman, it's kind of the same thing with her too. She would have about 3 issues for her, and that's it. Heck, even JLA would have an issue part of this thing. Yes, but some of the other ones basically last a lot longer, while books like Nightwing, Catwoman, those 2 books, really short. Like, not much involvement. And they're immediately dropped from this storyline. Well, for some reason, maybe because they won't have too many books published at this point when it comes to, let's just say, No Man's Land, which lasts for an entire freaking year. Like, oh my gosh, it is like a lot. Yes, it's a lot. But if you read this book from the complete editions, it seems as though with book 2, it's an improvement over book 1, which I do agree with that. I'm going to give both books a 9 out of 10. Both good starts. It's a good start for No Man's Land, and I can't wait to do more of this stuff because it's just a really good story. Okay, so that's it for this particular review. By the way, the Mark Kane stuff, that basically is just David Kane trying to assassinate Jim Gordon. Cassandra Cain stops him and saves Jim Gordon's life twice over the course of the story, and she basically gets accepted as Batgirl. Yep. So yeah, that's it for this particular review, and I was hoping to do more stuff tonight, but gotta wait till tomorrow when I do my review for Miss Kobash's Dragon Maid and Drugstore in the World, along with the Super Sentai. Okay, next video. Bye.